Are the Heat looking to save salary cap space for 2026? And if so, what's the point? We answer that and why current all-star guard isn't on Miami's radar in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Have a jam-packed show for you today. We got a bunch of stuff to get to, but David, I want to start with this report from Barry Jackson creating some waves among Heat fans. He wrote yesterday for the Herald, quote, "There is no specific Heat goal of creating 2026 cap space, but there is a desire to maintain flexibility. That means having room under the luxury tax line and the first apron, which makes trades easier," end quote. So like I said, a bunch to get to today. We're going to talk about what kind of trades we're talking about potentially next summer. You teased an all-star guard. We'll talk about that all-star guard. We're also going to talk about a way that Miami can actually make room for Precious Achiuwa later on in the show that doesn't involve just waiving Terry Rozier. So a bunch of stuff to get to. But when you see Barry write no specific Heat goal of creating 2026 cap space, what are you thinking there? Because that's sort of the bill that we've been sold for a couple of years now.
Yeah, it just seems something I pointed out before, like that there is no exact plan in place, and they're kind of just flying by the seat of their pants and hoping something shakes free. And I know that they've operated like that in the past, but it almost felt like at least there was a goal to improve the roster somehow, and the pursuit of a superstar was always their main objective in terms of finding ways to improve the roster. Now, I don't know that there's an easy way of doing that. And that's when you hear the phrasing, no specific goal, well, that kind of just seems like it applies to all of their motivation over the last couple of seasons. And I just wonder exactly how they find, what they look at when they see this roster, how they see this roster competing in an Eastern Conference that, as we've talked about before, is more wide open this year. They'll be competitive. I think you and I are both pretty optimistic that they'll be better than a lot of people expect them to be. And yet we also recognize that they're far from one of the elite teams in the East. And that being the case, you have to find a way to improve. And then it just doesn't seem like that's aligning with what their goal or lack thereof might be.
So I think cap space is overrated these days.
Sure.
We just don't see players hit free agency. The number one free agent this summer was Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker just fine, but he just came in at what, 97 or something like that in our Locked On Top 100. We're talking about like the 97th, 90th something best player in the league. That was the prize of free agency this year. Stars just don't hit free agency anymore. Very rarely, I should say. And when you look at some of the guys who signed extensions, Luka, Jaren Jackson Jr., Kevin Durant hasn't signed the extension yet, but we expect it to happen. The guys who we thought could be available in 2026 ain't going to be available in 2026 anymore. And so this idea of Miami maintaining cap space, I get it from a fan perspective of, I really would like cap space to go out and sign some guys and flip this roster over and stuff like that. But whether it's, a wholesale changes to the roster or going out and using that cap space on a star level free agent, the way that they did in 2010, because we remember the success that this front office has had in planning in advance for cap space. But then everything, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Everything has to do with context. And you look at the league and you're like, who are the free agents next year? Like, who do we care about maintaining this cap flexibility for in 2026? Now, the frustrating part about that is, well, to your point, David, well, then when is this cap space going to matter? When is this flexibility going to yield the superstar that we all agree we need? So, Barry Jackson also adds in this report that the Heat are open to extending Norm Powell and eating into that cap space depending on how this season goes. Powell is extension eligible between now and June 30th. So essentially between now and the end of the season. So this is not one of those extensions that have to get done before the season. He has until the end of the year. So the Heat, and we've talked about this since they traded for Norm Powell. It was one of the reasons I like the Powell trade so much is A, he's an expiring contract, and B, his extension is set up to the point where if the Heat want to keep him around, they can, but they have plenty of time to wait before making that sort of commitment to him. If he ends up just being awesome, then just extend him, because I mentioned the potential free agents next summer. Kristaps Porzingis could be available. John Collins, Austin Reeves, maybe. Zach LaVine has a player option. Rui Hachimura, Tobias Harris, CJ McCollum, Colin Sexton, Harrison Barnes, Anthony Simons. Like, these are the guys that we're talking about. You can make an argument Norm Powell is better than all of them, right? Depending on how this season goes. So yeah, I think when they're open to extending Norm Powell and eating into that cap space potentially for next summer, I think it's fair to question. It could be frustrating for Heat fans to not have that cap space, but then you look at the guys who are available and be like, I don't know that any of those guys are better than Powell.
So in that sense, then does the second part of Barry's statement that Miami's still looking to remain under the salary cap, under the first apron, so that they can maintain roster flexibility, is that something that you see as an optimistic point of
Yes.
view? Because if that's the case, then okay, so that gives them the chances to still make additions to the roster, perhaps even the kind of superstar level upgrade that we've been talking about.
Yeah, so just to kind of get to the numbers on this, Andrew Wiggins has a player option for next summer for $30 million.
Right.
Norm Powell, expiring contract as of now, extension eligible between now and the end of the regular season. If the Heat were to let Powell walk, and let's say Wiggins declines the player option and enters unrestricted free agency and doesn't resign, so then Wiggins also walks. So Powell, Wiggins, they walk. Miami would have $28 million in cap space. Sounds like a lot of money. Not a lot of money to actually go get a max level player.
Right.
Not even if a max level player was available, which we don't know that one will be. But that's not max space. It's enough space to go get Porzingis. It's enough space to go get perhaps maybe somebody like Austin Reeves or Zach LaVine. I don't know. But it's $28 million of space. There's a lot that you can do with it, plus some of the exceptions that go along with it. If Wiggins and Powell come back, they could still be under those aprons. And they'll be over the cap, under the aprons. And if they operate as an over the cap team, under the luxury tax team, they'll have access to the non-taxpayer mid-level exception at $15.1 million. So even if they bring back Wiggins and Powell, they'll still have $15 million to play around with this summer, which is not an exception that they've had available to them for a couple of years. And so when we talk about them wanting to stay under the luxury tax, this is why. It's not just because Mickey Arison wants to save a bunch of money, which is it's part of it, sure. Hall of Famer Mickey Arison, but also because it does create real flexibility under the new CBA to say, hey, we can bring back Wiggins, we could bring back Powell, and then we can spend $15 million on a player who, by the way, that's how the Hawks got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, was with that exception. So you can go get a player of that level, not a superstar player, but a bona fide rotation piece, which might be something that Miami needs next summer, in addition to whatever star player. So yeah, I think the flexibility part is the most important part here. And I don't want that to go understated, where I think maybe a lot of Heat fans are looking at like the no cap space part of it.
Now, you made a point about Powell specifically, that the Heat kind of want to wait and see what his performance this season would be like before making a decision on him. And now we're talking about the roster flexibility or the cap flexibility next year if you allow Powell and or Wiggins and to walk. And to me, it just seems like we've gone down this road before. I think I feel a little PTSD at the idea of Miami becoming overly enamored with players that have very limited ceilings. And I would almost rather that they just lean into that possibility of not. I mean, look, we haven't even seen Powell play here. I like Norm. I really do think he's going to be good this year for Miami. And I think Wiggs can embrace a certain role here. But I don't know. I'm becoming more dubious about
Just a
players.
little 2017-ish.
Yeah. I'm getting that Kelly Olynyk vibes, James Johnson vibes. Yeah.
These are better versions of those players, though, right?
No doubt. But still not good enough. And this is what the team kind of needs. So if you're going to do that, honestly, are you going to win that many more games with Andrew Wiggins than you are, say, Jaime Jaquez? Or who knows if either of those players are stifling the potential development of a Nikola Jovic, where he can emerge as a starter. A lot has to, play out this year before you can make those kinds of decisions. But it just feels like that's a path that Miami has gone down before and has led them into trouble because they re-signed players that they liked at higher than value contracts. That includes Duncan Robinson, that includes Dion Waiters, et cetera. So I just don't want Miami's front office to go down that path anymore because they've done it before.
Yeah.
I'd almost rather they just say, you know what, we are going to be a 30-win team, rather than be like, no, we feel like we could be a 45-win team, and they actually are closer to 38 wins.
So the beauty of what the Heat can do is that they can wait, right? They can see how the season plays out before making any of those long-term commitments. They can go in next summer and be like, you know what? We don't want Wiggins. We don't want Powell. They can convince Wiggins maybe perhaps to decline the player option, however they did it, however they got Duncan Robinson to decline, whatever. I don't know. Maybe Wiggins declines the player option. Powell becomes an unrestricted free agent. They don't extend him. They say, okay, ready. We're ready to take that step back. We just took a calculated step back and trading Haywood Highsmith. This would be obviously a much more dramatic version of that. But then at the same time, like in a vacuum, first of all, we know that the Heat don't like to take those huge step backs. They don't want to be a 30-win team. They'd rather be a 40-win team than a 30-win team. And that is not an obvious decision to make in the way that the NBA is built and works, right? Like sometimes you'd rather be the 30 or 20-win team than the 40-win team. But, you know, you look at, okay, if the decision is Wiggins and Powell or $28 million in cap space to spend on John Collins, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
that's a really tough decision to make in the sense of like, we're just going to walk away from two good players to sign one of these sort of not very exciting free agents.
no, that makes sense. And I get it. It's just, but I think also, I don't know, maybe between that salary cap space and maybe trading away some of the other players under contract. I'm not sure who. I'm not saying any name specifically, but it's just, at least it would feel like there's a path towards getting that star level player. I think it would be a lot more easily. When you look at, go ahead.
No, let's talk about it. We got to take a break here, but in terms of getting that star player, maybe they need cap space. Maybe they don't need cap space to land that next star. We're going to keep talking about this next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Fuel. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game, whether you're out on the course or just need a little energy, extra energy perhaps, to push the power through your day. 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. Has anyone in your golf group ever tried to pull off a ridiculous bet, like a crazy wager or a hole in one shot or something like that? How did it go down? Well, guess what? There's lots of different possibilities there. You can get that extra boost you need. Maybe it's possible for you to find the energy you're looking for, and maybe you'll get that lucky shot off. And it's certainly a possibility thanks to 5 Hour Energy. Golf is about good times and good people and good flavors. The grape, ginger, lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse to go to without leaving the course or chasing down the Bev cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for two to any golf tournament in the USA. Wes, what golf tournament would you go to? Masters?
I want to go to the Waste Management Open. That seems like a good time.
All right. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Oh, there goes that option. Ends October 31st, 2025. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Let's talk about the star player part of this, David. You want to finish that thought that you were getting to?
Yeah, I just, to me, you would think that if you're able to clear some of that salary cap space and maybe along with some other tradable contracts, you might be able to acquire that superstar. At least I would feel a little bit better about it. I think that's a better option than just having said, flexibility, whatever that entails, because flexibility doesn't really seem all that flexible. At least that's not what we've seen from this Heat roster and front office over the last couple of seasons. And I know, look, they're trying to avoid the payment of the luxury tax. That's fine. They're trying to stay under the apron. I get it. But I think to your point earlier, like flexibility, salary cap space, all those things feel less important now than they did even 10 years ago. And so at least you want to give yourself the better of the two options. If neither of them are ideal, at least you have the better option of being able to clear the salary cap space necessary so that you can maybe pursue that superstar.
That star has to be a free agent, right? Like that star has to be there. And in 2026, that star is not probably going to be there. Now, that said, you can do the cap space thing again and try for the summer of 2027, where you just sign guys to short-term deals and deals that you can get out of. 2027, Steph Curry, Giannis, Anthony Davis, Nikola Jokic, Karl Anthony Towns, Donovan Mitchell, like all these guys are currently slated to be either unrestricted free agents or have player options to become free agents that summer. But again, this is what we did with 2026. And a lot of these guys just end up signing the extensions before they make it to free agency because the new CBA rewards teams and players for sticking with their team with a higher level extension. So we'll see. They could do the cap space thing. To me, they're kind of doing both right now. There is the potential for 2027 cap space to maybe go get one of those guys if they get some sort of hint through the grapevine that maybe one of these guys are going to be available. And at the same time, they do have flexibility as being an under the apron team. They are starting to get more of these first round picks unlocked and things like that. They could trade 3 first round picks right now, which is pretty good. But the other name here that we need to talk about who could potentially be a free agent next year, and maybe this is worth actually maintaining cap space for, is Trae Young. So like Norm Powell, he can sign an extension between now and the end of the regular season, June 30th. He's likely to wait because he could potentially make more money by making All-NBA this year. So it really doesn't make sense for Trae Young to sign the extension unless he just really wants to be in Atlanta, sign the long-term deal there. But if he makes All-NBA, which is very possible for Trae Young, right? Like that is not unrealistic. If he makes All-NBA, he can qualify for the Supermax, right? So on the other hand, it doesn't really make sense for him. And by the way, it might not make sense for Atlanta, right? We don't know where the Hawks stand with Young. It's possible that he could be available next summer. But, David, Barry also wrote in his Herald piece, quote, "At this point, it's considered unlikely that Trae Young, would end up with the Heat. Everything is fluid, but that's where things stand at the moment," end quote. A little vague there, maybe purposely so.
Yeah.
Is it unlikely because Trae Young doesn't want to be in Miami? Is it unlikely because maybe everybody believes that Trae Young has nothing to do with Miami? Everybody just believes Trae Young is destined to end up staying in Atlanta. Or is it unlikely because Miami isn't all that interested in Trae Young? That if that were the case, that shouldn't come as a surprise just because of Trae Young's reputation and the Heat's reputation. It doesn't really sound like those things would mesh. But I would argue, David, the Heat would be insane right now to rule out Trae Young in terms of a potential fit. It doesn't mean that they have to go get him. It doesn't mean that they can't go get him. It doesn't mean that Trae Young is even going to be available. But this idea that, that guy's not for us, if they've made that decision, that to me is foolish.
Yeah, I've seen that perspective before from Heat fans. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the reputation and the reality that Young as a defender is so subpar that he's going to sabotage a lot of what this team does and their identity over the last few, 30 seasons. So Young just doesn't seem like the right fit here. But the more I think about it, he would be such an ideal fit for this team because Miami has lacked that true playmaker since, I don't know, LeBron James. Like, have they had a high quality playmaker? Like the closest they got maybe was Kyle Lowry at his best because he was just looking to really get everybody going. He was no longer the active scorer, but to blend that playmaking ability with Trae's scoring ability would give them a very potent offense. And we talked about this before, that we think that this season they might have to lean into this current iteration of the roster and maximize their offensive potential, even if that means sacrificing the defensive identity that they built over the last couple of seasons. So if you're going to do that, why not try to acquire a player like Young, who can boost this offense, who is going to automatically add something that they haven't had in a long time? So I think it would be a great fit. I think if you surround him with the right players, like we've been doing this exercise of the top 25 players of the last 25 seasons. And we talked about why Miami traded Eddie Jones for Jason Williams. And he was a much better fit on this roster. Jason Williams, smallish, not a good defender. But guess what? He thrived here because they had the right players that would be able to score, that he would be able to help maximize their offensive potential, and they led them to a championship. So I'm not saying that's the same comparison necessarily, but it makes sense if you can surround Young with the right players, and that's something that Atlanta hasn't been able to do. If Miami can find a way to surround him with the right players, you'd see a significant boost to what they're capable of offensively, and that might be enough to make them one of the top teams in the East.
You need to be a very good offense these days. Defense does not win championships. You have to be good at both.
Ideally.
But defense alone, well, you have to, right? Like you have to be good, but to win the championship, you have to.
Yeah.
Which means you got to be good at both, which means you got to be good at offense, which Miami hasn't been for 3 years. They've been bottom 10 in offense over and over and over again. Trae Young is the kind of guy who is not a walking top 10 offense the way that Bam is sort of a walking top 10 defense.
Yeah.
But man, he's really helpful. And if any team and any coach specifically is going to find ways to cover up for Trae Young's deficiencies defensively, it's the guy who's done that with Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson and Goran Dragic and some of these other guys over the years. It's Eric Spoelstra. And if you needed to put somebody behind Trae Young to try to cover up for some of those defensive inefficiencies, it would be exactly a guy as versatile and as good defensively and as elite defensively as Bam Adebayo. So, yeah, Trae Young's not a perfect player. Nobody's saying he is. But you don't get, like the NBA, you don't get to choose your superstar. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You don't get to do it. You just get the guy who's available, right? And so this is what Miami did in 2019 when they went and got Jimmy Butler.
Right.
You know? And so when you look at where Miami is, going back to the cap part of this, being under the luxury tax, it was a sign and trade for Jimmy Butler, right? You could only do the sign and trade if you're under that second apron. And you got to be far enough under that second apron that you could do the sign and trade, still fill out the rest of the roster without, because when you execute the sign and trade, you get literally hard capped at that second apron. So if Trae Young is not is an unrestricted free agent next summer, then maybe Miami could figure out a way to create cap space and go get him. If he resigns on an extension, they're going to have to trade for him. Or it could be a sign and trade type of deal where Atlanta is getting something back and Miami is able to facilitate the acquisition of Trae Young. That's what this flexibility is for too. Whether it's for Trae Young or anybody else, this allows them to go and sign and trade for that next superstar the way they did for Jimmy Butler, because they are so far below that second apron that they don't even have to worry about it, and that potential hard cap that comes along with what happens once you execute that sign and trade deal. So a lot to get to and kind of break down there, but hopefully we did a pretty decent job of it. We did talk yesterday, David, about the Heat's interest in Precious Achiuwa. To switch gears a little bit here, we do have more details on how the Heat can sign him without having to release Terry Rozier. We'll talk about that next. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. David, shameless plug here, if you'd allow me for just like a couple of seconds. In case people missed it, I've taken over as host of Locked On NBA Daily, Monday, Friday show, alongside Matt Moore and Hayes. Matt Moore from the Action Network, Locked On Nuggets. You know him as HP Paroxysm over on Twitter. And Hayes over from Locked On Bulls. The show's really good. It's the highest listened to podcast on the network, and we're trying to pick up things on YouTube. So check out Locked On NBA on YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button while you're over there. And while you're there on YouTube, subscribe to Locked On Heat. David, we talked about yesterday ways to create room for Precious Achiuwa and whether or not Miami should get Precious Achiuwa in terms of just signing a backup big. We've had multiple reports now that Miami is in contact with Precious Achiuwa. Precious Achiuwa still has a home in the area, which matters. And he'd be very interested in coming back to Miami, it sounds like. But the one thing we keep talking about is, okay, is it worth releasing Terry Rozier and just waiving him outright? Because only of his $26.6 million salary this season, only $24.9 million is guaranteed. So if you waived it and signed saved the $1.5 million, that would create enough cap space to sign a minimum contract guy such as Precious Achiuwa. The problem with that, as we've discussed, you're waiving Terry Rozier. You're getting nothing back for him. You're punting on the opportunity for him to maybe have a bounce back year. You're also, maybe more importantly, punting on the ability to use his expiring contract in a trade in February before the trade deadline, which could potentially get you a guy way better than Precious Achiuwa. So that's sort of the tough part there. Let's say they don't have to do that. Maybe they don't have to make a decision on Rozier right now. There's two other ways that they can sign Precious Achiuwa that I think is worth having this conversation. Number one, they can waive and stretch Simone Fontecchio. They could do that. That, to me, is a little bit more palatable than punting on having that expiring contract from Rozier. I like Fontecchio. I think he could be useful. I don't exactly know where he plays in the rotation, though. And if we're just doing, who's the better player, Precious Achiuwa or Simone Fontecchio? I'd probably say Fontecchio, but it's not by a lot.
No.
And with Fontecchio, again, where does he play? Does he play in front of Jaime? Does he play in front of Nico? Who's he playing in front? Does he play in front of Paul? We don't really know. With Precious, I know, or any other backup center for that matter, but with Precious, if we're going to put a name to it, I know exactly where he's going to play. He's going to play as the third big some nights, not all nights, but when the Heat need him. That's where he's going to play. And so that is a little bit more palatable. There's one other way that the Heat can go get Precious Achiuwa. Before I get to that, what do you think about the Fontecchio option?
Yeah, I mean, we just spent a long time talking about Miami keeping the salary cap flexibility and having Fontecchio's contract stretched over that next few seasons. Probably
That's a
does,
negative.
yeah, it seems like it would go antithetical to that. So, it doesn't seem realistic. I think they're a little bit more cautious about taking on dead money for a couple seasons when they don't have to. So I just don't think that's very realistic. And I think right now
So to put a
they'd
number
rather
to
have
it,
the
it would
potential
be
of Fontecchio. Yeah.
sorry, it would be $2.8 million in dead cap hits this season, next season, and the following season. So for 3 straight years, it would be $2.8 million in the cap for a player who doesn't play for you.
Right. So for a team that counts pennies and watches things as closely as they do, they probably wouldn't want $3 million of dead money on their books.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but $3 million of dead money on the books right now would put them over the luxury tax. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't sound like,
Sure.
oh, who cares? $2.8 million. No, it matters. It matters. Like, had they had $2.8 million in space, they probably wouldn't have had to trade Haywood Highsmith. You know, like, it's like this stuff really matters in today's CBA. So it is a calculated risk, especially for a guy who you're like, all right, let's sign Precious Achiuwa. Maybe he's good,
Right.
you know, for a year. Maybe he's an answer, or maybe we're just doing this again with this ever revolving door of backup centers that kind of come in and out here in Miami. So I don't think it should be off the table if they're desperate and they really feel like they need to go get that center. It's not so much money that the $2.8 million, not so much money that I'd be like, nope, can't do it. You have to break out the spreadsheets. You'd have to figure out ways to make sure, like, okay, is this really going to screw us in a couple of years? And if it does, then you can't do it. If it doesn't, maybe there's some wiggle room there. Maybe it's something that you entertain if you're the Heat's front office. Here's the other way. So we've talked about maybe waiting until midseason when these contracts get prorated, these minimum contracts get prorated, and you say, okay, well, how
Right.
long can Miami wait? Well, we did the math. It's December. It's not that long.
Yeah.
It's like a month and a half. Now, the risk you run is that the best centers left available, however good they might be, the best centers left available are gone by then. That's a risk there. But if you're Miami, can you just Vlad Golden this thing for a month and a half and then just get to December and say, all right, Precious, come on in. We found room for you. We with your prorated minimum, we can get you in, we can sneak you in and stay right under that luxury tax. That might be the best option. It could get a little rough for a month.
Yeah.
But at least you have Vlad Golden. You still have another two-way available. Maybe you sign another center with a two-way. You just body this thing for a few weeks. And then by December, like, if you really think about when the NBA season, like, it's not that long, and you're still got the whole calendar next year to play with a real backup center. You've got the whole playoff run. You got everything that you'd possibly need. So again, it'd be a little rough for a few weeks, but maybe it's something that you're willing to live with.
First, I appreciate the use of Vlad Golden as a verb. I think that's I'm sure he would appreciate it too. Secondly, yeah, I mean, how much better is Precious Achiuwa than Vlad Golden? Like, I don't think we know enough, but I think you can certainly just hang on to Golden for the first month or two of the season. My concern is, though, that we've talked about the NBA schedule before, the Heat schedule specifically,
Yep.
and there's some challenging stretches there to start the season, and they could wind up being almost out of the playoff picture very soon unless they find a way to be as good as we might expect them to be. Otherwise, if you're already in the hole, like, it doesn't matter. So I think this is the most realistic option because, again, if they're good enough and they want to make a commitment to shoring up the front court, then yes, Achiuwa makes sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. If they're out of it, if they lose 10 games in a row, if they're so far below 500 that doesn't make any sense for them to even make an acquisition like this, then you could just kind of stick with Golden and see what you get and hope for the best. But it will become apparent very early on whether this group is better than expected and competitive enough where that move becomes necessary or at least makes any sense whatsoever. Because Achiuwa, I don't think there's a lot of demand for him. I think that's why he's still available right now. So I'm sure lots of teams are probably playing that same wait and see approach whether or not they decide to even add him.
Maybe Miami just goes into training camp, sees what Golden has, and they make a decision at that point. They say, okay, like, what does this guy look like running up and down with other NBA players as opposed to doing it in Las Vegas? And maybe they go in the preseason and test it out. Maybe it's the first week of the season, to your point, with that tough start of the schedule. And they say, you know what? sorry, Simone, we got to waive and stretch you. We got to go get this guy. We got to go get a backup center. Like, they can make that decision in the first week of the season if they want.
Right.
They just don't have to make it now, which clearly they don't have to make it now because they're not making it now. I think these are things that they're just having conversations about in the front office. And just, I want to anticipate questions here. We might get a question about 10-day. Can you just sign him to a 10-day contract? No. Teams can't sign players to 10 days until January. So that's just not really an option right now. But the two-way guys can play. They can get another guy on a two-way if that's something that they want to do. They could swap out the two ways at any point if Flag Golden just isn't it. Maybe there's somebody else out there that is it. I don't know. If I have no reason to think that that's the case, but they could swap out the two ways with no impact to the salary cap. Those guys don't matter to the salary cap. So those are the options. We'll see what Miami does. But for now, let us know what you think in the YouTube comments. Should Miami maintain cap flexibility? Should they be looking at cap space either this summer or in 2027? What do we think about Trae Young as a potential option to lift Miami's offense? The Locked On NBA Top 100 is here, voted on by the Locked On NBA hosts on across this network. Our Top 100 was formed by experts who cover these teams and players every single day. Find the full list on Locked On Sports today and on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day.